Hey, connected yoga teachers. This is a bonus episode. I just got off of an interview with Shannon Roche of Yoga Alliance, and I just wanted to pass this along to you as quickly as possible because many of you have been asking about the new standards for yoga schools and the new standards that Yoga Alliance is talking about. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of news, a lot of questions. So Shannon was really great to say, yeah, let's try and answer a bunch of those on the podcast. Now, if you have more questions that rise up after today's episode with Shannon and I, yep, two Shannons, then I would love to continue this conversation in our Facebook group. So Shannon is a member of our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. If you're not already in there, you can find out how to join by going to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look for the join button. In other news, I want to tell you about something else that has come to my awareness this week that I'm super excited about, and I want our yoga teachers to take advantage of. Many of you know that our podcast sponsor is Schedulicity. You didn't hear the whole this episode is brought to you by Schedulicity by my daughter Sage at the beginning of this episode because this is a bonus episode. But I do want to tell you this scheduling software that I use, and they sponsor our podcast. Lots of yoga teachers are growing to love and use this software. The team over at Schedulicity has decided to do a really cool thing, and I want to tell you about it because I want you to get involved and to tell Schedulicity how you would love to be a part of this. If you search around on social media, mainly Instagram is what I have been watching, but you can also search around on Facebook. Search for the hashtag ScheduLicityCares. So all one word, ScheduLicityCares, and I'll spell out Schedulicity for you. ScheduLicity. So Schedulicity Cares is the hashtag to search for. And what you will see when you search for that hashtag is business owners telling Schedulicity what they would do with $5,000. And Schedulicity is giving away $5,000 a month to someone who is using Schedulicity and who tells them how they could use that money in their community. I think this is amazing. And so I reached out last week to some of the team over at Schedulicity, and I spoke with Michael, and he told me, you know what? We put money towards advertising every single month, and we could put money towards Google ads or Facebook ads or whatever ads, but we decided to try and put the money towards the small business owners who are working with our scheduling software, which I think is brilliant. I think it is worth taking note of what this company is doing. I also really want our yoga teachers to jump on this and start to post on Instagram, on Facebook, and tell Schedulicity, what would you do with $5,000? Some of you have been reaching out in our Facebook group on a thread in there and telling me what you would do with $5,000. Take those and put it online. Tag Schedulicity in it. Use the hashtag ScheduLicityCares, and I would love to see some connected yoga teachers winning $5,000. Also, tag me in it. I would share the heck out of that with people. So tag me. You can find me on Instagram. It's Shannon Crow Yoga. Yes, I use a couple of underscores in there, but you should be able to find me if you type in Shannon Crow Yoga. I hope. Okay, let's dive into the interview with Shannon. I won't be here at the end for much of a wrap up, just a little goodbye. But I just want to say thanks so much for subscribing to the podcast because that's how you got this episode. It's only our subscribers who are getting this bonus episode. So thanks. I think you're really cool. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Shannon. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting Yoga Alliance, Shannon. And I just have to say, I almost never get to talk to people named Shannon. So
I know, same. What is crazy about my life is that I've actually lived with two Shannons, which is...
You're kidding.
It's a rare name, I think.
It's gotten more common, but it certainly wasn't when I was younger.
No. Not at all. So, first of all, I know that I have a pile of questions for you today, but I actually have a really personal question about your bio. I was just reading
Sure.
here that it says, here's what your bio says. I'm sure you helped write it.
What does my bio say?
I prior to joining Yoga Alliance and the Yoga Alliance Foundation as Chief Operating Officer in 2017, Shannon led stakeholder engagement for the US Commerce Secretary to forward the Obama administration's top economic policy priorities. So what does that mean?
It means I was unbelievably fortunate and lucky, among other things. In particular, so the role was to support the Secretary of Commerce as the primary sort of person and spokesperson for the administration's economic agenda. And in particular, the support that I offered was that I managed and stewarded her relationships with the business community. And so that was, it was my job both to speak on behalf of the community to her in the course of, decisions that she was making and work that she was doing. And also to have my ear to the ground as to kind of what was coming up that we should know from them and hear from them. Not actually dissimilar, now that I'm saying it out loud, to the process we just ran.
It sounds like it. Like, I feel like this would give you some practice in terms of having a listen to what the community needs. I feel like that's what a Yoga Alliance did when they put out the huge kind of a survey, like a giant survey to more people than just Yoga Alliance members, correct?
Indeed. Yeah. And that was quite intentional. We know that participation in Yoga Alliance is voluntary, and we know that people have made decisions to join or not renew over the years for various different reasons. So we wanted to make sure that we were not just speaking to current members, but that we were speaking to and hearing from everyone who would claim to be a member of the yoga community, to the extent that that is a thing that's possible.
Right. And so did it just go out to yoga teachers then as well?
It went out, we put it out through our various media channels, and not just directed at members. And so we worked really hard to promote it outside of the membership, not just an email to members, but also it was on Facebook, obviously. But for example, we purchased Facebook ads so that people who, sort of have profiles that indicate that they are members of the community, but aren't people who would normally track what we're doing, knew that it was happening. And there were a lot of different versions of that kind of effort. We had some strategically placed ads. We published it in 7 different languages. So we were really trying really hard to make sure that we heard from as many folks as possible.
And do you know how many people then replied to that?
Over 12,000.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. I continue to be sort of taken aback by it in a really good way, and really grateful for everyone's participation. And it was interesting, really interesting to see, where there was super clear consensus, and where, there was some more trepidation among members of the community, or sort of different perspectives coming from different places.
Right. Mm-hmm. How would you define Yoga Alliance if someone said, what is Yoga Alliance? Someone asked me the other day, what is Yoga Alliance in compared to Yoga International? So I thought, why don't we start right at the very beginning?
That's a great question. When I answer that, I answer it on behalf of both Yoga Alliance and Yoga Alliance Foundation. Happy to get into that if it's helpful now or some other time. Yoga Alliance is the professional member association supporting teachers and schools, right? And we do that not only to support the teachers as professionals and in their professional development, but also to ensure that people who want to practice yoga can do so, period, and also can do so safely and know that they're being led by teachers that are offering high quality yoga education. And then in addition, the Yoga Alliance Foundation is its sister organization that is working to increase equity throughout yoga communities.
Great. So do you have is there another organization that's doing something similar to Yoga Alliance?
That is a good question. There are a number. So we have, as of right now, we have more than 100,000 teacher members, and north of, I believe at this point, it's almost 6,500 schools across more than 100 countries. So to answer your question, there are Yoga Alliance-like organizations in different countries, definitely, that are offering, just putting forth similar offerings to what we are trying to do. There are also other organizations that work, in spaces that are related to or similar to the space that we work in. Yoga International is a great example, although I would argue that they are far more expert in content development, for example. We also try to create some content to share with our members. We will be moving forward. We hope to be curating more content from other experts and other voices to share with our members. But Yoga International, for example, is pretty expert at creating content in yoga.
Right. I agree. They're really working away on that platform. It's good.
And it's been interesting. One of my goals in this role, and I hope that the standards process was a first step toward that, is for this organization to seek to partner with those kinds of organizations more frequently and more intentionally.
Nice. Like working together, collaborating together. That's fantastic.
Right.
So Yoga Alliance did this big survey. What happened? Was Yoga Alliance thinking we need to make some changes? Let's find out from our members what changes need to be made. Or did you just throw the survey out and say, tell us what you think needs changed? We think everything's fine.
No, not the latter. The survey was a piece of a really intentional effort within the standards review process and project to hear from members, to learn from members and the community broadly. And I think the converse of that is not to sit in this office and make decisions on our own without understanding where the community was and what it wanted and needed.
Right.
So the survey was our most far-reaching effort to do that. We had a number of other sort of avenues for inviting input and hearing from folks too.
Right. So I know that there was a very long email that I received from Yoga Alliance. But can you tell me what are those changes now that was what really caught everyone's attention? Okay, now the survey is done, and now there are some changes that are actually coming through because of that, because of what people expressed that they wanted as members. So can you tell us what some of those changes are, or some of the larger ones?
Indeed. And I think broadly, I would characterize them in kind of three overarching buckets. The first, and I think most tangible and tactile, is that we have significantly enhanced our primary credentialing offerings. And so at the moment, most of the work that we have done and the announcements that we made were focused on the RYS 200 and the RYT. Others will come in the future along the same lines, but the idea being that the credentials together will have been significantly enhanced. The second is that we have put in place, I hope, much greater rigor and integrity and accountability in our own processes, in how we manage and administer the credential. And then the third is that we have built into the credential and the community, I hope, an overall ethical commitment that we ask anybody who is going to participate as a Yoga Alliance member to sign on to and to commit to.
Okay, great. And so the driving force behind this was that really do you think that it's definitely from the feedback that you heard? Is there also some like yoga principles that were intertwined in there?
All of the above. I'll start with the feedback and one of the drivers. The organization is coming up on its 20-year anniversary. Certainly, it has done work over the years to up-level and to update its credentials since its founding. But it had been some time since the RYS and RYT credentials had a really deep dive, kind of wholesale look at them. And we felt that it was both our responsibility to do that, and also we're hearing from the community that the value of the credential, the sense of the value of the credential met the fact that it needs some updating. So we felt really strongly, understanding at the front end how difficult to process this would be, or how challenging or time consuming, that was our responsibility to the membership. If people were going to choose to participate with us, we wanted to make sure that they felt and saw the value in it.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think it was in an interview with Mado that you recently did, and I'll link to that in our show notes, where you're like, maybe if we would have known how intense this was going to be, we might not ever do it again.
Potentially true. I also, one of my goals coming out of this process is actually that we've put the credentials and the organization in a place where now we can maintain the work, and maintain the up-leveledness, for lack of a better word, and continue to up-level from here, rather than having to kind of go back at some future point and do something starting from scratch all over again.
Right. Okay. So what I was hearing a lot about in the last week or so is the impact that this is going to have on 200 ERYT 200 teachers. So before we get into that, though, I just want to let our listeners know, like, a registered yoga teacher is registered with Yoga Alliance and RYT. Mm-hmm. An ERYT, do you want to explain what an ERYT 200 is as opposed to an ERYT 500?
Sure. And I will do that kind of broadly, and then we'll share with you and point folks to the link where there's detailed descriptions, because they are detailed. Broadly, the E in front of either of those credentials is intended to indicate a length of and level of experience in teaching, in addition to the successful completion of a training course. And so at the 200 level, it's 2 years in addition to the actual training that people participate in. At the 500 level, it's 4, but there are some sort of definitions within that too.
Right. This just brings to mind a question that does circulate through our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group every once in a while. People will say, well, what if yoga teachers just submit their hours and they're not actually accurate at all? Is there anything to stop someone from doing that?
In the recent past, there really hasn't been, and it's a totally fair concern and and flag. We actually, as part of the greater rigor and accountability, we are internally implementing sort of new systems that will support our being better able to track the validity of some of those things.
Right. It's like, well, if you became an ERYT 500 in a week, that might be impossible.
Exactly.
Okay. That's good to know. So right now, in order to have, so I've been hearing from some yoga teachers who they're an ERYT 200. Mm-hmm. They either have a yoga school or they're thinking about opening a yoga school. And by the new standards, they need to be an ERYT 500 to be a lead trainer. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Am I getting that right?
That is correct. They will need to be an ERYT 500 by February 2022.
Okay.
This is not we made the announcement and have laid out a timeline for implementation intentionally, in the hopes that it gives people some time to kind of sit with this and prepare.
Right.
But
so
yes, your question.
So it was announced now, and then that will slowly come, you said February 2022.
Correct.
When are things going to change for the 300-hour, the prenatal, or the children's trainings? I feel like those are the 3 other schools that you can have.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. This piece of work and announcement was focused on the 200, to your point. The next one will be focused on those. And we are on a track right now to make a similar kind of announcement at this time next year. So around International Yoga Day. That is our plan and timeline. If for some reason we find that it's much easier and it goes much faster, we'll do that sooner, but that's my sense.
Okay. And do you know roughly what that will look like for 300-hour prenatal and children's teachers?
I don't, and I don't want to presume it. I mean, one of the things we tried really hard to do in this process was not go into it thinking that we knew what the answers were going to be at the end. And so we have some of the work that we did, hopefully much of the work that we did for the announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago will inform those announcements. And so I don't think that we'll be starting literally from day one. So I think, some of the focus on up-leveling, enhancements, accountability, both internally and externally, to your point, you can expect to see those in the announcement that we make next year. Beyond that, I don't want to, sort of hypothesize now about what the changes will be, because I don't want to bias myself as we go into the process.
I totally understand. I also want to know because I have a prenatal yoga school. I'm
right.
Like, what's coming? So I totally get that you have to hold on and like go through the process and see how things turn out that way. So different buckets of yoga teachers. There's the yoga teacher who comes right out of their yoga teacher training. Mm-hmm. They are not registered with Yoga Alliance yet. They don't have any teaching experience yet. How does this affect them?
It will affect them in a couple of different ways. And again, all of this goes into effect at various points in time that I won't detail here because I feel like trying to talk it through would just be confusing. But we can point you to, where the specific timelines are for that. As for RYTs, the changes that I think people will see pretty quickly will include, I'm trying to think of how to relate it. It would include the program, the kind of training that they will experience, I hope, number one. And then number two, when they're out, my sense is that from an RYT perspective, the initial interaction with Yoga Alliance will feel similar. The primary difference being that Yoga Alliance has never asked anything of RYTs in the past, save to confirm and prove that they have in fact graduated from a training program that's registered with us. Going forward, after the implementation goes into effect, we will ask every registered yoga teacher who is a member of Yoga Alliance to participate in an online course on equity in yoga broadly. And our thinking there was that we wanted to make sure that anyone who carries our credential can be seen in the marketplace as having awareness of some of the different factors that make potential yoga students feel like, everybody hears it, yoga is not for me. Mm-hmm. We aren't going into that exercise thinking that we will solve the world's problems by any stretch of the imagination, but simply that we hope that anybody who carries our credential will be known as somebody who can be expected to be cognizant of the different things that can make people feel like a yoga class is a place for them.
Okay. And did you say how long that online training is? Did I miss it?
It will be 10 credit hours. We are about to start working with people who are experts in those issues to develop the course. And so I don't yet know how many hours specifically it will be. I feel confident in saying that we're working very, very hard to make sure that it's nothing about this, hopefully, is overburdensome. So you can expect that it won't be another 200 hours of training.
Right.
And it really is intended to be a sort of initial take on things.
And that's for someone who wants to become a registered yoga teacher with Correct. Yoga Alliance. That doesn't affect anyone else coming out of a training. Like, say they graduate from their 200-hour and they're like, well, I'm not going to become a member of Yoga Alliance. That's fine.
Because we're voluntary, sort of yes and no. Because we're voluntary, we don't have jurisdiction over anyone who is not anyone's credentials, right, that are not ours. So in that sense, that's fair. On the other hand, this sense of equity, awareness of equity, and an overall commitment to ethics, and there are more parts of that as well, is baked into the updates to the standards for schools. And so I think anyone who has gone through a registered yoga schools program will at least have the school's take on that, which might be slightly different.
Okay, fantastic. That is the brand new yoga teacher. What about the yoga teacher who is an existing registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance? Will they also take this roughly 10-hour online course?
We will ask all of our RYT members to sign on to this updated ethical commitment. It will include an updated code of conduct, a new scope of practice for yoga teachers, and a commitment to equity in yoga. And so we will ask people to hold an RYT to take this course. We are going to, once we've developed a course, we are going to make it available to our members free of charge, and it will be allowed to count toward those 10 credit hours toward continuing education.
Great.
And to your earlier question, we will be able to know that that really is real. That's one I'll feel really confident in. So
you're like, they did it.
They did it.
That's fantastic. It makes me excited because I do think this, and I like how you said that you're going to have experts come in and teach part of that.
Hopefully the whole thing. I hope that this comes through in the announcement overall, and really in the work that we did. You know, in most cases, I don't think of Yoga Alliance, the organization, as it was. Certainly, we have expertise, but we aren't the only experts in the space. And in certain spaces, we shouldn't be looking to ourselves to answer questions. We should be pulling in other people who are more expert than we are. This is one where I feel really strongly that, you know, we need to, for a couple of different reasons, we need to learn from experts. All of us do, myself included, certainly. And also, I don't want this organization to take up the airtime of that conversation, rather than allowing the people who live and breathe the various reasons that, you know, one might not feel welcome in a yoga class, to have an opportunity to share their stories, to teach from their experience, and to tell us what they've learned.
That's great. I know we've had so many amazing people on this podcast, and really there's always something that you can learn. And then it really, our listeners say that, you know, they get to listen and learn from that bit and then grow, and it really impacts their teaching and their understanding. And you just don't know what you don't know, especially as a brand new yoga teacher. Oh my gosh. I think back to my early teaching days, and I feel like I had no idea in some ways.
Well, and I think that that's probably true, you know, throughout, right? I mean, none of us can, to your point, you can't know what you can't know. And so, you know, we want to make sure to pull in other voices to help all of us, you know, and I put myself at the front of that line, to help all of us kind of see some of those elements and to hear from them, you know, what we might not be seeing in our own lives. You know, the other thing that I hope that allows us to do is to kind of focus our work on the spaces where I think we can uniquely provide value to the members, right? So not only should we be elevating experts in their spaces, and will, but also we should be focused on the services that we can provide to the members that are unique to us, right? So, you know, block and tackle, hopefully.
So that's a 200-hour yoga teacher that we've sort of covered, like new and 200-hour. Is there anything else that they need to do other than just sort of wait for this online training, or do we know when that's happening?
The implementation of all of the changes will begin. We'll make our next set of announcements most likely in November. I don't have a specific date, but that's what we're aiming for. And the biggest pieces of the implementation will begin to go into effect in February of next year. And again, it's, you know, different pieces are at different times. So I'll make sure you have what I hope is a reasonably clear infographic of the different pieces and the different times.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
And so then what about if there's a 200-hour ERYT? So
Mhm.
that person has done their experience time, which is it 1,000 hours? Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1,000 hours of teaching. And then they decide that they want to start a yoga school. So I've heard from a few teachers this week. One person was saying, like, I'm an ERYT 200. I wanted to start a school. Do I submit the application now? Will it even be accepted? Or
Mm-hmm.
do I need to focus on becoming an ERYT 500 first?
Got it. Anyone should, to answer that question, anyone should feel willing to submit the applications that they intended to or want to or need to. We'll do the work of figuring out, what has been implemented and what has not. And if we need to work with an applicant or a member to help them figure out kind of where they are in that timeline, we will do that. So folks shouldn't feel that they need to wait necessarily. Once the changes have gone into effect with that first implementation date, there will be a window in which schools in particular can choose to apply or reapply for a credential using the old standards, or moving to the new standards. And actually, I should paraphrase that. Existing members, right? And so once the changes have gone into effect, new members will have the new standards apply. Existing members will have a window where in some cases they can choose.
Okay, so walk me through that again. Like, say for I can use myself as an example here. I have a prenatal yoga school, but if I had a 200-hour yoga school as well on top of that, then I would have an option to do what?
I'm going to get you the actual graphic where we lay this out.
I realize
for exactly that reason.
I know. Like I feel like I'm reading the things and I can't imagine what this is like to try and share all of this as well.
The hopefully clear, shorter version is once the new standards have gone into effect, which will be early next year, existing members will have a little bit of time where they still have, depending on the change, they still have time to make any changes they need to in order to meet the new standards.
Okay, so if someone was an ERYT 200, they would have this time to make up.
Correct.
To get that going. Are you calling that grandfathering? Because I heard someone mention grandfathering. Is that?
Not exactly.
Okay.
So no, we're not calling it that. And I think it's a slightly different thing. We are working on a grandparenting process, and that is related to the concern that some folks have raised about the changes to the lead trainer requirements that you mentioned earlier.
Okay. I like how you just said grandparenting instead of grandfathering. So, this is like the new, instead of saying grandfathering, let's say grandparenting. Someone was asking about that because I know an experienced yoga teacher who had missed the window of the grandparenting that happened a while ago. Will that person have that chance to do it again?
I would have to look at the specific set of circumstances. But let me try to answer the question sort of more broadly. So we have heard from a lot of folks, and you raised it, this concern about the updated lead trainer requirements. And to be clear, currently the requirements are sort of broad. Going forward, once the new changes have been implemented, in order to be a lead trainer, one will be asked to hold an ERYT 500, and schools will be asked to have lead trainers teach 75% of their program. That can be split over a couple people, but the content in total, we're asking to have taught by experienced teachers who have a breadth and depth of knowledge. That is directly reflective of maybe the strongest piece of feedback that we heard through the whole process, and not just strongly vocal, but vocal from across the spectrum. If people had been teaching for a short period of time, or if they, even in some cases, folks who are thinking about going to a training program, to people who, have been teaching for decades and decades and decades and who are household names. When the whole thing boiled down, really one of the things that everybody felt strongly about was that one thing that we could do to increase the value of the credential in a meaningful way is make sure that anybody who is especially leading, but also teaching in a program is doing so from a place of breadth and depth and experience.
Yeah. It's true, because the way the standards were before, you could graduate from a 200-hour, become an ERYT, and then start teaching pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. The time between sort of first program and beginning to teach was, now that I'm looking back on it, much shorter than I think we wanted necessarily. And certainly we've heard that the community wanted.
Right.
Having said that, and I think your initial question was about this idea of grandparenting, one of the principles that we went into this project with was to make the decisions that were necessary and were our responsibility to make, but not to try very hard not to do anything that would completely and entirely upend the industry or individual people's livelihoods. We know that a lot of our members are small business owners, and so any change is hard, let alone major change that sort of could potentially impact how you structure how you do business.
Right.
So we wanted to be really careful about that. We did announce a couple of weeks ago that there will be increased requirements for lead trainers. We will announce in probably, I'm hoping before the end of the summer, it will most likely be more like early fall, what our pathway will be for people who can or should be grandfathered or grandparented in this moment for that reason, right? Because what we don't want to do is, for the sake of a set of letters after somebody's name, cut out teachers who have an incredible breadth and depth of experience, but who never pursued, an ERYT 500 for whatever reason, because they didn't want to, because they moved away, because we never made it something that was important for someone to do. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that there's a path for those teachers to have their experience recognized by us, for us to recognize their experience. And also that at the end of the day, the final outcome, post implementation in a couple of years, is that we're all confident, not just Yoga Alliance, but the community are together confident that the people who are leading trainings are experienced and skilled and knowledgeable and have really had time to learn and sit with the teachings of the practice.
Right. What about 500-hour yoga teachers? Will they also be doing the equity training?
Yes.
Okay. That's nice to know that it's like, okay, everyone, let's all be on the same page with this part.
That's the hope. And I'm sure for some people, and I wish I had a better answer to this, I'm sure for some people that will feel burdensome. We really don't intend for it to. We really are putting that out there so that, as I said before, we can feel confident that if someone holds our credential, that it means X, Y, Z. And we feel as an organization, and we heard really clearly from the process and the feedback that we got from the community, that this commitment to equity in all of its forms is really important. And so we are reflecting that in the updated standards.
When you say it might feel overwhelming to some, you said it'll be free for all members. So really, those are the people who need to look at even taking that. Mm-hmm. It counts as continuing education. It is 10 hours, but it's online, you said.
10 credits, roughly some comparable number of hours.
Okay.
But yes, online.
Right. So it's not like then people are paying, like basically they'll be investing time.
Absolutely. And thank you. I appreciate your perspective there. I also recognize that, at a certain point in one's career, one no longer expects to be told what to learn.
Right.
In quite that way. And so, I get that. I honor it. I'm respectful of it. I also, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I also, you know, with myself being front of the line, believe that it's true that we all have things to learn, right? There are, as you said, you don't know what you don't know. And so we feel like this is a fair thing to ask of our members, and hopefully a lot of them share your perspective that it's not too bad.
I have so many questions now. I want to focus on in terms of online learning, because Yoga Alliance is using this, and it's a great tool to teach things online. Certain things. I mean, there are just certain things. When I teach the Mama Nurture prenatal yoga teacher training, I always ask the grads, do you think you could have learned this online? How could you have learned this online?
Oh, interesting.
And they're like, this would be
follow up with you
impossible.
on that.
What's that?
I said, I'd love to follow up with you on that.
Well, I can tell you they're always like, this, we don't know how this would be possible to get online.
And so I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that there are, or I feel confident, I should say, in saying that there are some pieces of the training that is common in a 200-hour program that can be delivered exceedingly well and exceedingly effectively online. And in fact, we've learned through the process that some pieces arguably can be delivered better online, right?
Right.
People can go back to the material over and over and over and kind of engage with it at their own pace. We also wanted to be careful that we didn't kind of, charge in that direction too excitedly. So we have implemented some hours that are able to be taught and able to be learned online. We're going to keep looking going forward to see if there are other places, other topics, other sort of amounts of time that we think fit those criteria of, sort of able to and better taught online. In particular, at this moment in time, this initial moment, we have included up to 20 hours of two different topic areas. Yoga, what we called yoga humanities, so philosophy, ethics, what used to be philosophy, lifestyle, and ethics in our terminology, and then also anatomy and physiology. That is, we've allowed for up to 20 hours of 30 of each of those, so that lead trainers have an opportunity to reinforce the learning that people did online in the classroom, physically in the classroom. And also for those, sort of elements within those topics that maybe are better taught in person, there's still the space to do that.
Right. Yeah, those would be the ones that, would be easy to do online. Teaching, though, is different. Much easier to know that, okay, everyone is teaching now. Everyone's getting their time in teaching.
Exactly. And that came out of a set of recommendations from one of 8 working groups that we convened. So in addition to the survey, in addition to the meetings that we had in person and online with members and non-members, we also convened 8 working groups of experts from both in and outside of yoga around particular, what we called areas of inquiry that we felt either we needed to do a lot of homework on, or would be especially sort of difficult or new or potentially controversial, right? I think online's a great example of the latter. We had one of those working groups was on online learning, and the set of questions around, can some or all of this be taught responsibly online? We know that a lot of education in all areas is moving online. And so what is the right stance for this organization, given the topics that we are sharing with our students, and what is or I should say our teachers are sharing with their students, and kind of what is the responsible position for us on behalf of our members, and also in this moment in time, when technology is just proliferating so fast.
It is. What do you see for the future in terms of Yoga Alliance? Do you think this is going to a place where, say, I know that there's a governing body for massage therapists. Are we
Mhm.
headed in that direction, do you think?
Um, I think a few things. We One of the reasons that we undertook all of this sort of learning and changing in the first place is because of the stance that we take and the work that we do in the advocacy and advocacy space to push back on governmental regulation. Um, the we felt really strongly that the best position for us as an organization and us as an advocate for teachers and schools and our members in general was to be able to really credibly say, we got this. We are a self-governing community. And here's all the work that we've done to be able to prove to any government agency that might come to us that, we got this. So that I hope that we're not headed toward the direction of regulation. Um, Yoga Alliance is a voluntary organization and will remain so. That is a founding tenet of the organization and remains really central to the work that we do. And so I think, to your point, I think the community and the collective will. I don't see a traditional governing body in its future in that way. I think that it is, I would argue that it is an effectively self-governed community, hopefully more so going forward. And we're continuing to sort of do what we need to do to shore that up. As for Yoga Alliance, this was the first piece of work, and I think in some ways the highest priority piece of work for us to offer greater value to our members. One of the things that I heard, sort of took a small chunk of my soul every time, but understand over and over again through the input gathering process was, I joined, but I don't really know why I joined because someone told me I had to, which by the way is not true. And I'm not really sure what I get for it. In fact, when I took this job, one of my very close friends, who's a longtime teacher, said almost verbatim to me, I know I was a member. I think it might have lapsed. I don't know. I didn't really have a reason to engage. And so that specifically is something that I hope that Yoga Alliance is on a path to change. We want to engage with our members. We want to support them. We so value the work that they do and want to do what we can to make it easier and to make their time used most effectively, right? It's sort of you often hear the joke that, if you want to, this was my father-in-law who used to say this to me, who started a software company a long time ago. And he always says, if you want to be a coder, code. If you want to think about what time the doors should open and what benefits your employees are getting, start a company, right? And so my hope is that we take, more and more and more of that latter bucket off of our members' shoulders so that they can do what they do well and what they love to do, which is, of course, teach.
Mm-hmm. That's really nice because that's the one thing that yoga teachers can use help with. I know that also, so let's go into some of you said people were saying like, I don't know what benefits I get being registered with Yoga Alliance. Like, here's my really honest reason why I'm registered. I run a prenatal yoga school. So I did just bump through and get my 500 hour almost by accident. Like I had 400 hours and I thought, oh, let's put one more on that with one yoga school for my 300 hour. And then when I started my prenatal school, that's a requirement. And I wanted people to be able to be an RPYT. That was the driving force. I'm a Canadian, so I don't feel like I get the same benefits in terms of like insurance discounts and stuff. Maybe if I wanted to buy more stuff online, I'm not much of a shopper. So tell me, what are the other benefits? Like maybe I'm missing something other than having a yoga school.
Sure. So I'll answer that in sort of two ways. One, broadly, there are really sort of 3 or 4 buckets of work that we focus on doing on behalf of members. The credential being the obvious primary one that most people know us for. A couple of others are member education, and historically that has often meant content that we create, and as we talked about, I'm hoping that going forward that will be broader. So member education, advocacy, which is this work that we do at both the state and at the moment U.S. federal level, sort of TBD in other countries going forward, but advocating on behalf of teachers and schools to sort of hopefully avoid overburdensome government regulation. Right. And this question, as you mentioned, of member benefits. And so there are actually a pretty significant number of discounts that are available to members on everything from, it's not just yoga pants, although I think that's how understandably it can be thought of. Everything from business insurance to participation in music licensing programs at a discount to yoga pants to, items that one might want to either sell in a school or studio if you own a studio, or have in order to teach, right? So there's sort of a fairly broad set of discounts available to members. And one piece of work that you'll be hearing from us going forward, you'll be hearing more from us about going forward, is these benefits. We're working right now to stand up some new programs, with the thought being that yoga teachers, somewhat uniquely, are not, people like me who sit behind a desk all day, right? And so we've done a lot of work to look at, a day in the life, for lack of a better description, and to try and pinpoint all the different service providers that teachers encounter in the course of their days, and to reach out and to try and negotiate partnerships with them that our members could benefit from.
That'd be amazing. Can you get QuickBooks on there on the list?
It's on the list.
Okay. Can we send our wish list to you?
Yes, please.
That'll be the next thread. Like, what would you like a discount on? That's a great.
I would be thrilled if people sent those to us. We have done a lot of essentially like market research, right? But
yeah,
and we do have on our staff lots of people who are also professional yoga teachers. But that's, that is one set of perspectives. And yes, please, we would welcome that. So anyone can email any requests for benefits to I want to help YA, yogaalliance.org. That's an email address that we stood up for the Standards Review Project. We read every single email. We respond to as many as we can. But if that inbox were flooded with suggestions of additional member benefits, I would be thrilled.
That's good. That's good. Our listeners might be doing that. Anything else that you feel like, what about our yoga schools? Should they be doing something else? Should they be just getting ready for what's coming? Maybe the 300-hour, the prenatal, the children's, but especially the 200-hour. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that they need to be doing right now?
It's a great question. I think what I would suggest is ask of schools is, spend some time on the web pages that we stood up for the announcement. There are very detailed sort of walkthroughs of the changes and of the implementation plan available there. We've tried our best to provide that information in as many different formats for as many different learning styles as we could think of. Again, open to suggestions there. If there's something we missed, please let us know. Many of the pages are translated or translatable into multiple languages. The videos are closed captioned. Like hopefully it's accessible. There are a lot of infographics. Good. Pictures always help me to learn, that's for sure. Me too. And to try to answer some of these process questions that can get weedy. So I would suggest that schools and school owners spend some time there. If they have questions, our member services team has been keeping extended hours to support the announcement. They should absolutely feel free to reach out. We are happy to answer any questions by phone or email at any point in time. And I guess what I would just sort of close that thought with this. One of the reasons that we wanted to, there are lots of reasons we wanted to structure this process as not, a decree from on high, but as an engagement process where we learned. One of those reasons was because we know that a lot of our members and a lot of our member schools in particular are doing great work. And so we tried really hard to find, the learnings from those best practices and make that our baseline. All of which is to say, I think for a lot of schools that are doing great work, hopefully the changes, while they may, I hope that they have a significant impact on our credential and on the community. In an individual business, in some cases, they might not feel huge in the early days. A long way of saying, I hope that people aren't too worried. And I don't think that there's too much that I would point to for most of our members.
Right. It does. It makes me look at what it was like to submit. So I worked for 8 years to write the Mama Nurture manual. And when I submitted it, it took me about 30 or 40 minutes. I was like a bit deflated. Like, really? Isn't anyone going to check that I invested like so much of my time into this?
Yeah.
And so it makes me feel like we're on the right track. And I know that we hear a lot of complaints about Yoga Alliance. And at this point, there isn't another group who is stepping forward for yoga teachers in the way that Yoga Alliance is. And I would say to those people who are complaining, write the letters, write the emails, tell Yoga Alliance what you want. Did you complete the survey? Did you have your voice heard in that? Or do you think you can create something better? Step on it. And I think it's important that we do complain when we see something
totally.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I agree. And I know I'm, maybe not the most credible messenger on this for folks, but we really want to hear that, right? I hope that what comes through in all of this work is that we really are trying to up-level the credential, change the way that we are supporting members and doing business. But we can only do what we know needs to be done. And so I really invite people to share their feedback with us. I can't promise that we'll make a change, tomorrow, but I can promise that we'll listen and hear it and take it into account and make the choices for the credential and for the organization on behalf of the members that we think are the most responsible and the most supportive. And it's, some of those are hard sometimes, but that's okay. It's literally my job. And I really hope people will tell us what it is that they need, because we really do want to support people as much as we can.
Right. Well, yeah, it's it's not like parenting, but it's kind of like parenting. I set the rules in this house, and there are a lot of complaints sometimes, and I am trying to set the rules based on what I think is going to work out best. And I definitely encourage feedback from my children. And I'm not saying that all members of Yoga Alliance are like children, but we are this community. And I love how you said at the very beginning, we're this community of professionals.
Well, and I agree. I don't think of members as our children. Particularly given the earlier conversation we had about our kids. But I do, I love the analogy to parenting because, this organization is trying to make decisions on behalf of the community broadly that we believe, and we believe based on input from members and the community, are going to serve the community best in the long run, right? And some of those aren't easy to deal with in the short run. But we really are trying to move the dial in a meaningful way, which is not necessarily something that happens immediately, and it's not easy on Wednesday at 3. If you want what you want, to use the analogy of my son. The other thing that was really interesting for me personally, sort of sitting in this seat in the process, was the number of people who shared with us in one way or another some version of almost like a back channeling secret, right? I know that, this is happening in my community, or this school down the street is teaching in this way. Or even this person who graduated from my teacher training program is not, living up to the standards that I had hoped I'd set. But I, in the seat of the school owner and a community member and a neighbor, can't or don't want to sort of use my voice in certain ways.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Right. Let Yoga Alliance do that.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, actually, I wanted to ask you about because the way things were set up before, and I feel like maybe there's a change to this, correct me if I'm wrong, you can give feedback for the training that you took, but it was all visible and online with your name attached. Is that still the same way?
It is at the moment, although that is in the next set of work, things we are going to take a look at in our next set of work. We originally, so it's called social credentialing, and it is still part of the technology system that we have that supports this whole process. 2 things. One, we will be updating that technology system later this year. And I hope that that's great news. 2, and so that gives us a moment to kind of reevaluate some of the pieces of it. 2, the intention with social credentialing and with social credentialing not being anonymous was that it would sort of give some validity to any one voice in a space that is somewhat anonymous in and of itself, right? So, you don't know when you're reading something online, right, who it was submitted by. That didn't work for lots of reasons. I think primary among them being that we know that people who go through teacher training programs hope to then get jobs as teachers. And the place they're most likely to do that is the place where they took their training. Makes it really hard to get employed by somebody you just crashed online.
There wasn't enough anatomy in that. They were like, you don't get the job. Exactly.
So at a minimum, we will be making updates to this kind of idea of social credentialing and review sharing and feedback sharing. This is another one where I don't want to presuppose the outcome because we haven't finished the work yet. But I do think that there's most likely a happy medium where people who go through training programs can share feedback with whether it's us or the school or some set of mentors or local entities. We'll figure that out. And maybe some of it's anonymous and maybe some of it's not. But I think, Yoga Alliance can pretty reliably learn from the patterns that come through that feedback, right?
Yes.
So that we're not, on the other hand, then putting a school at risk of being retaliated against by somebody who was frustrated.
Right.
So it's tricky.
It is tricky.
But I think there's value in the feedback, and I think there's value in the idea. I just think we've got some tweaks to make and some work to do.
Yeah. This is fascinating. I know that our listeners will have way more questions, so I will put in the show notes as many helpful links as possible, and then they can use the email again. What is it again if they want to reach out?
It's I want to help YA, long, but that is all one word. I want to help YA at yogaalliance.org.
Perfect. We'll put that also in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Shannon, and for the work that you do helping us out.
Same. Really appreciate your voice in your community and the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, connected yoga teachers, I would love to hear from you. What are your questions now that you've heard from Shannon? Now that you've heard what Yoga Alliance is doing? Let's dive in and have some discussion in the Facebook group. That's what it's there for. It's for you to communicate. So you can share a post, you can share a video, it can be live, it can be recorded. It is there for discussion between yoga teacher professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in today for the bonus episode, and huge thanks to our Connected Yoga Teacher team as well. Samantha, Suzanne, Crunch, and Cindy, because I said, let's get this bonus episode out there. And you all said, okay, all right, we're in. Let's do this. Alrighty, Connected Yoga Teachers, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to self, to your practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?